Hey guys, it's January 31st, 2023. I've got a couple quick updates and I want to make sure that I get into your hands as quickly as possible. So no fancy post-production, none of that kind of stuff. We're doing this in the live format. Let's get into it. A couple of these comes from Jared over at the Guns and Gadgets channel. So thank you, Jared. If you are not aware of them, I don't know what rock you're living under, but go ahead, check them out. He posted a great update, which was sort of in reference to not only what myself, but some other people found as well with respect to the ATF eForms website under the FAQ. The ATF helpfully listed that, look, by the way, if I were to take a suppressor and hand that to someone else, that is what we now call a felony because there can be no longer any kind of co-dominion or co-control or anything like that. Our video surged to 50,000 views in like 1 day or 2 days or something like that, which was fantastic. And in about the same amount of time, the ATF deleted that portion off their website. So again, kudos to the ATF for taking that down. They now have posted something saying, look, long story short, as long as you let someone else who's not a prohibited possessor take possession of the item, that is not a transfer. And long story short, you're good to go. So that's fantastic. Jared from Guns and Gadgets also posted on his channel the fact that the ATF is saying that if you have a pistol brace and you take that off an AR-15 and for whatever reason you're just left with the buffer tube, depending on how your brace is assembled, that they will not consider that a pistol brace or the creation of an SBR under their rule going forward. So in other words, long story short, they are not considering a buffer tube on an AR-15 pistol to constitute an SBR, which is of course fantastic news for everybody who have AR-15s and they don't want to deal with the SBR nonsense. Otherwise, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working through the frequently asked questions and adding a couple of my thoughts on this. There's a couple interesting things that stood out to me. One of them was the ATF's continued insistence on the fact that they're really taking a look when they're making these decisions of balls or strike, this will convert it into an SBR or not. They're really looking at what is the surface area, and I think that that really goes back to that buffer tube issue is not constituting an SBR. Couple other quick hits that I keep seeing. One is that you cannot register an SBS. No short-barreled shotguns under this amnesty, eForms 1, all that kind of stuff. This is SBRs only. Another thing is that if you do register it, it looks like they are allowing folks to unregister your SBR if you have Form 1, Form 4, as the case may be, buyer's remorse down the line. So you can unregister it. There's an email, NFA facts@atf.gov that they encourage you to contact. You cannot register it. Here's another question. Can you register it under a trust? Let's say you have an NFA gun trust, something like that. Are you allowed to register these devices using the amnesty-free Form 1 under the trust? The answer basically is yes, but you probably can't. Here's why. The ATF says yes, however, the firearm would have needed to be owned by the trust prior to the date of the final rule being published on the Federal Register. Evidence that the firearms was in trust should be provided with the registration document. So I know the kind of questions I'm going to be getting. What kind of evidence would that be? I assume, depending upon the trust laws in your state, contact local bar, but you're probably looking at either your Schedule A or your assignment of property, depending upon how your trust is set up, to basically have those dates showing, look, on December 1st, on June 1st of 2022, or whatever the case may be, I put this into the trust. I is acting as the lawful grantor or co-trustee, again, pursuant to how your trust is set up. So that's my guess as to what kind of paperwork the ATF might be looking for. Of course, there's only one way to find out, and that's to have perfect hindsight once the case comes. There is no limit as to how many of these devices you can register under your Form 1, again, provided that, keep in mind, they need to have been assembled prior to the date, which, oh, by the way, is today, which means that the 120 days brings us to May 31st, 2023. So inside the 120-day amnesty, the ATF is saying you are good to go. They are not going to be looking to enforce or prosecute individuals. Beyond that date, the ATF is effectively declaring open season. As a reminder, it is a 10-year prison sentence along with astronomical fines if you choose not to comply. If you don't want to register, the ATF is also saying you can basically disassemble, destroy, or turn in as being the other major options. Another question here is that I've seen frequently in the comments section is if you have a rifle and you want to attach a pistol brace to it, is that going to be okay? And the short answer is yes, provided from the ATF that, of course, we still have the 16-inch or greater barrel as well as the 26-inch or greater overall length. Again, subject to your local laws. Check your local listings. I've heard some issues out there that different states might be looking to change the laws and how the overall length gets ruled. In other words, is it from the maximum telescoping position or folding position, or are they going to start to do the old Michigan rule where they bring it in and say from the smallest position? Are all the different states going to keep it at 26 inches, or some states can be going higher? I've been hearing different rumors about different things. I frankly have not had enough time to look into it. If you want me to look into some of these other things, let me know in the comment field below. Also, by the way, free plug for myself now. Please help us grow if you like this kind of content, and if you want to see more, if you want to be able to see myself and Derek and other people here. Derek's off camera. He's over here. I'm gesturing towards him. You'll just have to take that on faith. But if you want to be able to have Derek and I make these sorts of videos and interrupt our workflow to bring this kind of stuff to you, please let us know. And the best way of doing that, of course, comment in the comment box, but also subscribing to the channel. Help us grow. That's fantastic, and gives both Derek and myself some motivation to trudge in -0-degree weather, -9, I think it was, something like that, in order to hike over here to where our studio is and figure this out. Another question, can I legally sell my stabilizing brace, i.e. pistol brace, to someone who may be interested in making a short-barreled rifle? Long story short, they're saying, look, we are not treating the pistol braces themselves as a regulated item. They, in essence, only create a regulated item when you attach them to a pistol, which would then trigger the rifle, the short-barrel rifle criteria. So that's going to be something that's really important to keep in mind on this. Likewise, when we're talking about transfers, and this one's mainly for all you FFLs out there, but it's also for anybody who's just wants to, not wake up and accidentally commit a felony someday, is it looks like okay, I'm going to read this. After publication of the final rule, can a federal firearms licensee sell a firearm and a stabilizing brace in one transaction? That's the question. Answer. If the attachment of the stabilizing brace to the firearm would make it a short-barreled rifle, the firearm must be registered in the National Firearms Registration Transfer Record, and on and on and on. So long story short, if the attachment would turn it into an SBR, no-go. We did a fantastic video talking about constructive intent and constructive possession. Yeah, I understand it's not exactly a thing, but this is it. They're saying that if you transfer it all in one purchase, then in essence, we've got a constructive intent thing. If you want to know more about that, check out our description for the link to our video below. What are my options if I want to sell my registered firearm as an SBR with or without the brace? So again, there isn't a potential option to deregister your SBR, but otherwise, if you want to sell your SBR, keep in mind, you can't just sell that to a buddy. You can't just sell that back to a gun store. It's got to be going through a Form 4. I know lots of people are going to get hung up on that one. And I know that doesn't matter how many times I pound the table and tell the ATF don't do this, or if I pound the table and tell you guys watch out. If you're not used to this NFA world, there's a lot of nifty ways you can go to prison. And I'm not saying that to make light of it. I'm saying that out of helplessness, because what can we really do here? But please, please, please knuckle down. You can't just sell an SBR to a buddy. It's got to go through a Form 4. This is not like a private transfer sort of situation that you can just go and sell it to a friend and subject to local laws and rules. Here's a big one. If you live in a state that you cannot lawfully possess an SBR under state or federal law, so in other words, in Wisconsin, basically all this stuff, SBRs, machine guns, suppressors, so forth, all this stuff is basically contraband unless you fit a federal exception. It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist to it. One of them is, of course, going out and getting your Form 1, Form 4, or potentially Form 5, as the case may be. But what happens if you don't live in one of those states? The ATF is basically saying, no, you are out of luck. Your options are disassembly, lawful sale, destruction, or turn-in. That's basically where your options are at. So this is not an end-around states, for instance, like Illinois, where if you cannot possess an SBR, but suddenly this is a loophole in. It's not going to work that way. This was a really interesting one that I've not seen people talk about, which is, keep in mind, anytime you Form 1 an item, you are legally manufacturing an item. You are legally manufacturing a firearm. Anytime you do that, there must be an engraving requirement that you have to watch out. So, question is, once the firearm is registered, so for those who are going to be taking the Form 1 route, am I required to mark the firearm since I manufactured a short-barreled rifle? And the long story short on their answer is no, provided that if the SBR is equipped with a stabilizing brace, if you registered it within the 120-day tax forbearance period, that's what they're calling it, the amnesty, the possessor is allowed to adopt the markings on the firearm. The maker's marking exception is only applicable to firearms that are registered pursuant to the final rule. So if the firearm is a personally made firearm, then you still have to go through everything else. But that means that if you're going to wind up Form 1ing or doing something else down the line outside the 120 days, there will be an engraving requirement. And again, someone's going to get tripped up on this. So you got to be careful about that. All right. Guys, that's all the big things I have. What other things do you want me to take a look at? Was this video helpful? Do you like these kind of break-in videos where we kind of do things informally? Not a lot of post-production, not a lot of B-roll flying all over the place, not a lot of things to make Derek, who's still hovering over there, not a lot of things to drive him crazy. Let us know in the comment field below. Again, please take a moment to click like, subscribe, comment, of course, not only for us, but also for the algorithm.